Imagine reaching global stardom before you're even 20, yet still admitting years later that you didn't truly feel like a woman until the age of 26. That's the startling confession Lorde made while creating her new album Virgin. But this isn't just another pop record, it's a story of blurred lines, hidden struggles, and a shocking claim that part of womanhood is sometimes being a man. What does she really mean by that, and how did it shape the music she's releasing now? The answers are far stranger and far more personal than anyone expected. For most artists, identity is something they figure out before they ever step into the spotlight. But for Lorde, it took years of fame, pressure, and personal searching before she had what she calls her awakening. She confessed that she didn't actually feel like a woman until she turned 26. That realization hit her unexpectedly, almost like flipping a switch. Growing up, she was surrounded by influences that didn't fit neatly into one box. Her mother carried an androgynous presence, and the music playing at home was filled with icons like David Bowie and Grace Jones, artists who blurred the lines between masculine and feminine with effortless power. At the time, it just felt like art. But looking back, Lorde realized those figures had quietly given her permission to explore identities outside of what the world told her a woman should be. It wasn't about choosing one role. It was about discovering that identity could shift, stretch, and even contradict itself. And that realization would soon pour directly into her music. When Lorde talks about femininity, she doesn't romanticize it. She calls it both a gift and a risk. On one hand, she saw how androgyny could be a kind of armor, a way to carry herself with mystery and strength. On the other hand, she admits she also witnessed the darker side of being a woman, where that same identity could make life more dangerous. This dual perspective became central to Virgin. Lorde began to see gender not as a fixed role, but as a spectrum of survival. Sometimes leaning into masculinity gave her confidence. Sometimes embracing femininity gave her connection. But it was the constant balance between the two that made her feel whole. And that's why she now says unapologetically, part of being a woman is sometimes being a man. This wasn't just a personal revelation, it was a challenge to her audience. A way of asking, how much of your identity has been chosen by you, and how much has been decided for you? Sometimes the most powerful revelations happen in the most unexpected places. For Lorde, it was at the 2023 GQ Men of the Year party. On paper, it sounded glamorous, an evening of celebrities, photographers, and celebration. But when she stepped into the room dressed in hyper-feminine attire, something felt wrong. She later admitted that instead of confidence, she felt a heavy discomfort, like she was wearing a costume that didn't belong to her. That night didn't just pass by unnoticed. It became the spark for one of her boldest tracks on Virgin, Man of the Year. Rather than brush off the experience, Lorde turned it into art, dissecting what it meant to perform femininity in a space dominated by masculine energy. The song isn't simply about that party. It's about the awkwardness, the role-playing, and the subtle rebellion of claiming space in a way that didn't fit traditional rules. What could have been just another industry event ended up shaping the very core of her new music. And it set the stage for her most daring visual transformation yet. If the GQ party was the spark, the music video for Man of the Year was the fire. Lorde didn't hold back. She leaned into symbolism so raw it left fans stunned. Inspired by Walter de Maria's Earth Room, the video shows her binding her chest and moving through a floor covered in soil. It's gritty, unpolished, and deeply intentional. For Lorde, this wasn't just a performance. It was a ritual, a way of reshaping her body and image right in front of the camera. The soil became a metaphor for rebirth, for stripping away layers and reconnecting with something primal. The act of binding her chest wasn't about hiding. It was about claiming control, experimenting with the physical form of identity itself. The response was explosive. Some fans called it liberating, others found it unsettling, but almost everyone agreed it was unforgettable. In just a few minutes of imagery, Lorde managed to spark conversations about gender, power, and self-expression that stretched far beyond music. And as bold as the video was, it was only one piece of a much larger puzzle, the album itself. When Virgin finally dropped in June 2025, it was clear this wasn't just another pop record. Critics described it as a return to Lorde's synth-pop roots, but with darker undertones and sharper edges. The glossy surface of dance pop production hid something much heavier underneath. a raw self-portrait of a woman in transition. Every track carried a confession. Themes of body image, disordered eating, and generational trauma surfaced in lyrics that felt almost too personal to share. Sexual identity and self-transformation became the backbone of the album, with Lorde treating each song like a snapshot of who she was at that exact moment. She admitted she wanted Virgin to serve as a kind of document, proof of her femininity at 26, something she could look back on years later to see how much had changed. But what surprised fans most wasn't the sound. It was the vulnerability. For someone who has always been careful about her public image, this was Lorde laying everything bare. It wasn't just an album you listened to, it was one you felt, like opening a diary you weren't supposed to read. And the deeper you read, the more shocking the revelations became. Behind the music, Lorde was undergoing a transformation that was just as radical as what fans heard on Virgin. In interviews, she admitted to taking steps that might sound extreme, but for her, they were about peeling away every layer of control placed on her body. She spoke about taping down her chest, not as an act of shame, but as a way to experience herself outside the confines of femininity. She revealed that she had stopped taking birth control, describing it as a break from what she called regulated femininity. And in some of the most candid moments of her career, she acknowledged experimenting with therapy involving substances like MDMA and psilocybin. For Lorde, these weren't reckless escapes. They were tools to dismantle old wounds and reconstruct a freer, more authentic self. It was messy. It was unconventional. But it was also deeply human. Each decision carved away another piece of the image the world expected her to uphold, making space for the complex, contradictory identity she was finally ready to embrace. And those choices didn't just stay private. They bled directly into the music, giving Virgin its unsettling honesty. As raw as that journey was, Lorde wasn't planning to keep it confined to the studio. She wanted to bring it to the stage. With the album complete, Lorde knew the next step wasn't just to perform it live. It was to invite her audience into the world she had built. That's how the Ultrasound World Tour was born. Set to kick off on September 17th in Austin, Texas, the tour isn't framed as a typical concert. Lorde has described it as a shared ritual, a chance for fans to not just hear the music, but to step inside its themes of transformation and self-discovery. The shows promise immersive visuals, unexpected stage designs, and moments where the audience becomes part of the performance. Just as Virgin blurred the line between masculine and feminine, the tour aims to blur the line between artist and listener. Every night is designed to feel personal, unpredictable, and alive. More like a collective experiment than a rehearsed routine. For Lorde, the stage is where the personal becomes universal. The same struggles she poured into her lyrics, questions of gender, identity, and freedom, are now reflected back at her by thousands of fans singing every word. In that exchange, she isn't just performing. She's proving that her transformation doesn't exist in isolation. It resonates with anyone who's ever felt caught between who they are and who the world expects them to be, and that's what makes the closing message of Virgin so powerful. At the heart of Virgin lies a message that feels both deeply personal and universally relatable. Identity doesn't have to be fixed. Lorde doesn't present herself as just feminine or masculine. She embraces both, often at the same time. To her, that duality isn't a contradiction. It's freedom. When she says that part of being a woman is sometimes being a man, she's not trying to shock for the sake of headlines. She's speaking to the reality that gender, like life itself, is fluid. One day it can feel like armor, the next it can feel like a cage, but instead of picking one side, Lorde has chosen to live in the tension, to accept the shifting nature of who she is. And that's what makes Virgin so much more than an album. It's a living document of a person in flux, an artist showing that strength comes not from pretending to have all the answers, but from daring to ask the questions out loud. Lorde's Virgin isn't just music, it's a mirror. It reflects the uncomfortable truths about gender, identity, and the struggle to define ourselves in a world obsessed with labels. It challenges the listener to consider their own contradictions, their own hidden parts, and to see them not as weaknesses, but as sources of power. From feeling like she wasn't truly a woman until 26, to binding her chest and shedding regulated femininity, Lorde has turned her private battles into art that demands attention. And now, with her Ultrasound World Tour about to begin, she's ready to turn that personal revolution into a collective one. In the end, Virgin leaves us with one unforgettable truth. Identity isn't about fitting into a box. It's about breaking it open, again and again. And that's what makes Lorde's latest chapter not just shocking, but unforgettable.